and welcome to Fan Fic Friday. If this is your first time at Fan Fic Friday, you can see the previous chapters in, I believe we have them up on YouTube, up through a certain amount. We haven't gotten all the way caught up, but we're getting close. If you would like to read along with me, the chapter that we are reading and the link for the fanfic that we are reading is in the chat. We are reading my absolute favorite fanfic, Harry Potter and the Natural 20. I'm a big Harry Potter fan. I am a big D&D fan. Like, I've been playing D&D for most of my life, so I do appreciate a good crossover. Let me tell you. When last we left our band of intrepid adventurers, well, at least one of them is an intrepid adventurer. The rest of them are kind of, students and wizards. But when last we left the group, the quad, they're not a trio of terror, which is what I usually call Hermione, Ron, and Harry, but the quad of conundrums? Yeah, we'll go with that. When last we left the kiddos, Milo had decided to, because he trusts Quirrell so very much, had decided to tell Quirrell all of his secrets, including how his magic works in his world. But unbeknownst to him, at the time he was doing that, Snape, who had polyjuiced himself to look exactly like Milo, was trying to get information from Quirrell, like immediately before, and had jinxed Harry in the Quidditch match in a desperate attempt, I believe personally, to get Milo kicked out of school. It's not exactly his, smoothest attempt, but I don't know. It was playing into Draco's plot, and he didn't even know about Draco's plot, so it's just a little awkward for me. But anyway, Harry Potter and the Natural 20, Chapter 16, Be Good for Goodness Sake, which we all know is not something that's going to be easy for Milo to do. Just how it is. Sit, McGonagall commanded. Milo was in the hard leather chair in her office before she'd finished saying the one-syllable word. Your behavior today was cowardly, treacherous, sickening, and unbecoming of a Hogwarts student, much less a member of my house. I have half a mind to expel you this very minute. What do you have to say for yourself? Well, said Milo, in my defense, he sort of had it coming. I mean, look at him. You will explain to me, right now, clearly and succinctly, how you could possibly think that such a poor, sweet, innocent boy who's already suffered so much had, what was it you said? Oh yes, how he had it coming. If I find your explanation to be in any way unsatisfactory, you'll be out of here faster than you can say Mimbulus Mimbuliota. He's obviously working for new you-know-who. McGonagall sat down heavily in her office chair, stammering, and apparently at a complete loss for words. Of all the ridiculous, impossible! Why, he would be the last person to ever... In any case, you know who's long gone. I was a friend of his parents. I won't listen to such unfounded accusations. Oh, so you're in his father's pocket as well? Milo asked, disappointed. Seems like the whole wizarding world is convinced he's such a great guy when he's really, clearly, obviously evil. It's like you're all blind, I swear. Evil? A tad arrogant when he was younger, and I suppose he had an unfortunate and blatant disregard for any rules he found inconvenient, but never evil. There are places in this country, and right now I'm debating if you're sitting in one as we speak, where statements like that would be responded to with a challenge to a duel. I always said you'd figured that you'd be on our side, Professor. I can see that my trust was misplaced. And what exactly is your side then, boy? McGonagall asked, her face flushed with anger. Milo was starting to wonder if he hadn't multiclassed into barbarian for some mysterious reason. The good guys, Professor? Milo said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. How dare you? If you're of a mind to call Draco Malfoy a poor, sweet, innocent boy, then, Milo said with a hint of finality, I think we're through anyways. McGonagall stared at him as if he had just said the sky was green. You, Draco? She stopped talking and simply breathed steadily for several moments, evidently trying to calm down. Who did you think we are talking about? Who do you think we're talking about? Harry James Potter, McGonagall said. The boy you nearly killed today. Oh, Milo said. What was it Quirrell had mentioned about Polyjuice Potion? That. Yes, that. There must be a change of plans. My family are still loyal, more than I can say for some. Yes, my lord, of course, my lord, but I've always been your most devout. Interesting, isn't it, when he asked, all my servants profess to be my most devout, my most faithful. Paradoxical, it seems. Well, we've had setbacks, I'll admit to that, my lord, but indeed, we have had setbacks. Perhaps I should turn to Lucius instead, one of my most faithful servants. But my lord, we are weak, forgive me, but you know it to be true. What is to stop him from simply killing us and continuing to rule in your stead? Killing you, you mean? For I am far beyond the reach of even Lucius Malfoy. Yes, of course, my lord. What I meant was that you would be as I found you. Surely a significant setback, even for one such as... Yes, I know what you mean. Ought to be more concise. Takes ages to say anything with your stutter. So, my lord, what shall we do? Continue to try for the stone, or for the boy? I see no reason we cannot do both. For if one fails, and knowing you one will fail, we will have the other. Simply prudent. But he claims he cannot cast the spell yet. But his power grows with violence. Provide him with violence, Quirrell. Violence at all levels. At all levels, my lord? Violence he can overcome, but violence where he fears for his life, for the lives of others, at all times, Quirrell, at all times. He must never know safety again. But keep him alive, yes, always alive. It will take time, my lord, as with the Silence! You are never to mention that to me again! I'm sorry, my lord. Have mercy, the pain. Mercy? Yes, my lord. Please, I beg you. Very well. Am I not merciful, Quirrell? You are granted reprieve from your suffering for the moment. Thank you, my... Cease. No time to waste on your incomprehensible stammering. We must plan carefully. My lord, what if... I meant we figuratively. I, of course, shall plan carefully. You shall listen, and you shall act. Of course, my lord. You are their hero now, are you not? Saved the mudblood from the monster. We must use this. How, my lord? This is what you must do. So you see, it wasn't me at all who cast the hex or whatever it was, Milo explained reasonably, but in fact Professor Snape, polyjuiced to look exactly like me. And you seriously expect me to believe this load of tripe? McGonagall snapped. Professor Snape, McGonagall corrected sharply. Right. Professor Snape's had it out for Potter since he first set foot in this castle, and everyone knows it." "Be that as it may," McGonagall said. Milo was somewhat astonished that she didn't contest that point. "The notion that he would use polyjuice to facilitate assaulting one of our students is completely out of the question. Now, are you quite ready to tell me the truth, or would you rather I have you thrown out of the gates immediately?" "Truth! Of course, Professor. Dose me with the Veritasium, and you'll be able to tell I'm being completely honest." "Regrettably, the use of Veritasium is strictly controlled by the Ministry," McGonagall said, "and is not used in the investigation of school rule infractions." "Then doesn't the fact that I was going to volunteer to take it count towards me?" "Not if you were already aware of these regulations, Mr. Anastasia Leandon." Milo stared at her, fear rising. He couldn't believe he was about to be expelled for something that happened off stage. "You can't just expel me without any proof," he protested. "I have 26 eyewitness reports that say you brazenly used the hurling hex on Mr. Potter in the middle of a Quidditch match in plain sight." But I didn't." Milo was appalled. That was the best argument that he could think of. "You will pack your school trunk in your dormitory, where you will remain until morning, when you will be taken to the Ministry to have your wand destroyed." "My wand!" Milo said with sudden inspiration. "Here, look!" Milo drew his wand from his pocket. "I don't have time for this foolishness," McGonagall muttered. "But look at it, Professor! I had it on me the whole time. What wand did I allegedly use to hex Harry? Was it chestnut, 13 inches, with a dragon heartstring core? No! It can't have been, because all wands are unique." "It only would have been visible for a few seconds," McGonagall said. "Nobody reported what wand you used." That was his last hope. He couldn't believe he was going to be thrown out of Hogwarts because a crowd of NPCs failed their spot checks to see something he wasn't even there for. "So," Milo said hesitantly, "what happens now? Where will I go?" "After the Ministry?" McGonagall said. For an almost imperceptible moment, her gaze seemed to soften. "After your wand has been destroyed, it's quite up to you." Well, Professor. I'll head to my dormitory now." Milo walked back to the familiar sights of Gryffindor Common Room in a daze. "And then I hit him with a water balloon and said, 'Hey, Malfoy, think fast,'" Ron said exuberantly, causing Hermione to snort in a most unladylike fashion. "How'd everything go with Crabbe and Goyle?" "Oh, it was no trouble at all. I just walked up to them and said, 'Oh no, I'm just a poor defenseless muggle-born girl who misplaced her wand. Whatever shall I do?'" Hermione said with a wicked grin. "Took them about 5 seconds to try and hex me. Anything I did after that was purely in self-defense, you understand." The pair of them were waiting outside Pomfrey's hospital wing for the strict witch to declare Harry fit for visitors. Eventually, the heavy doors opened. "Oh," Pomfrey said wearily, "it's you lot again. Well, come in, come in." She ushered the pair into the ward. "Visitors," Neville said happily, his nose just poking out between thick bandages. "I never get visitors." "Nah, we're here for Harry," said Ron, ignoring the sharp look from Hermione. "Hey," said Harry. Injuries notwithstanding, he seemed to be in high spirits. "Did you hear? Or see? I caught it! Looks like I'm not rubbish after all." To tell the truth, I only caught the first bit," Ron admitted, looking apologetic. "But that's only because our plan worked. Can you believe it? Malfoy told me everything." As he happily told Harry about Malfoy's crackpot scheme involving the firebolts and the nimbuses, Harry burst out laughing, clutching his sides. "So when they saw me lose control of my broom," he asked when he could finally breathe, "they thought Milo hexed me? Nutty, isn't it?" "Where is he, by the way?" Harry asked, looking around. "I don't know," said Ron. "Good question. I haven't seen him since before the match. You don't think Snape caught him, do you?" "Can't have," Neville said. Harry, Ron, and Hermione turned to him, somewhat surprised that he'd spoken. "He was at the Quidditch game." "What? Really?" Ron asked. "He could have helped with Malfoy, then." "Can't have," Neville said, his face, well, the visible parts anyway, uncharacteristically grim. "He was too busy hexing Harry's broomstick." "You mean Malfoy was right?" Ron asked, alarmed. "Merlin's pants, that turncoat." Looks like, Neville said sullenly. No, Harry said firmly. I don't believe it. He was set up. I saw it myself. He just stood up, pulled out his wand, and hexed you, right in plain sight. There was a brief silence. Did you say wand? Harry asked. Password? Asked the fat lady. Squeak, Milo replied, and the portrait swung open. It's a stupid password, he thought to himself. The ultra-secure common room can be infiltrated with a fighter in heavy armor after a rainy day. As soon as Milo entered the common room, he wished he still had invisibility prepared. The sounds of partying cut off immediately when he came into sight, and everyone simply stared at him silently. Milo walked directly to the dorm, and the crowd parted slightly around him. It seemed that nobody wanted to touch him. Milo was surprised at how much their shocked disapproval hurt him. They were only NPCs, after all. He collapsed into his four-poster bed, exhausted. He knew he should be thinking of a plan, some clever scheme to get out of this, but he just felt too tired. He'd been defeated. That was all there was to it. He was going to be expelled. Lucius had won. Professor! Hermione practically shouted, knocking sharply on the office door. There was no reply. She must be out somewhere, she moaned. Maybe she's in the staff room, Ron suggested, or the Great Hall? Or she's patrolling the corridors, Hermione said, despair growing. Or visiting another teacher's office, or overseeing detention, or she's out of the castle. She could even be... Hermione gasped. What? Ron asked, alarmed. You don't think she... Could it be? She wouldn't be, would she? One day, Ron said, you're going to give me a straight answer. And on that day, I'm going to buy a lottery ticket and win 1,000 galleons. She might be... And then I would be selected for head boy. Ron, listen, and named Minister of Magic. Ron! Then Snape will apologize for being a git and stick his head in a cauldron. Oh, and he'll pull Malfoy in after him. To round it off, the Cuddly Cannons... Sorry, that's not what Ron would say. To round it off, the Chudley Cannons will ask me over for tea to give them a few pointers on quaffle handling. And I'll go to bed early in my solid gold king-sized bed... stuffed with unicorn's hair in my floating palace. Abruptly, Ron realized Hermione had stopped interrupting him. Are you quite done? Hermione asked testily. I was going to mention the butterbeer fountains, marble statues, and how it can travel to Jupiter, but it seems somehow unnecessary now. I was going to say, before you so rudely cut it off, that she might already be at the ministry. Ron stared at her blankly. Why would she be at the ministry? Because, Hermione explained wearily, when a student is to be expelled, the DMLE and the Improper Use of Magic Office, in particular, have to be informed. Ron continued to stare at her without comprehension. So that they can destroy the student's wand, Hermione said, fighting down the urge to add, duh. Blimey, Ron said. Who do you think is getting the axe? Hermione stared at him with genuine surprise on her face. Milo, of course? Honestly, is there anything between those two ears of yours? Ron paled. We have to find McGonagall before that happens, he said. Yes, Ron, Hermione said, her voice commendably, under the circumstances, both level and patient. That's why we're here, knocking on her office door. Hermione paused for a moment, willing herself not to say it, but even her doughty willpower could break under sufficient strain. Duh! Neville, who for one reason or another had been living in the hospital wing for the past 2 months, when he was lucky, that is, the rest of the time he was at St. Mungo's, had a few special concessions from Madame Pomfrey that most short-term patients didn't get. They were little things, like a reading lamp, because Neville always had trouble with Lumos, a few extra pillows, the blanket that smelled the least of cats, a bedside table with a pair of drawers for keeping his clothes in, and the cot next to the window. It was due to this fact that, on Friday evening, he saw a tall, thin figure striding confidently up to the Hogwarts gates. "Hey, Harry," Neville said. "What's up, Nev?" Harry asked sleepily. "Well, Ron and Hermione went out to find McGonagall, right?" "Sure." "And that was 4 hours ago, right?" "Was it?" Harry asked. He must have drifted off at some point, he realized. "Yeah, it was, so they must not have found her." "Guess not." "Well, she's right outside." "She is?" Harry asked. All traces of drowsiness gone. He looked around for Madame Pomfrey, but she seemed to be out somewhere. Well, there was nothing else for it. Agonizingly, he stood up and limped towards the door. Oh, he's in trouble. "Well, we've searched the staff room, the common room, every teacher's office, all known corridors of Hogwarts, Hagrid's hut, the dungeons, the Great Hall, the lake, the Quidditch pitch, the astronomy tower, and most of the empty classrooms, but there is no sign of her." Ron moaned in despair. He and Hermione were standing in the entrance hall, trying to decide where to look next. "Sign of whom?" asked a familiar voice. The pair turned to see Professor McGonagall standing at the entrance, taking off her coat and looking curious. "Professor," Hermione said with relief, "we finally found you." "Me?" McGonagall, acting in surprise. "Is Peeves acting up again?" "No," Hermione said at the same time Ron said probably. "Well, then, what can I help you with?" "It's about Milo," Hermione said. "He's innocent." McGonagall's face hardened. "I understand he's your friend, but there were dozens of witnesses. I'm sorry, but I have no choice but to expel him." "No, Professor, you don't understand. You see..." Hermione froze. She was about to say, "You see, he's been using a wand and Milo's magic doesn't need wands," but she realized that would just get him expelled for a different reason. She began to realize that maybe, this time, she hadn't thought their plan all the way through. "He wouldn't do something like that," she finished lamely. "Yeah," said Ron. "I mean, he's a bit of a nutter mind, but he's Harry's mate. He wouldn't hex him like that." "I'm sorry," McGonagall said, "but without something a bit more than your gut feelings, the case is open and shut. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a great deal of paperwork to do. Unless one of you has something concrete?" "I asked him to," said a voice. Hermione turned in surprise to see Harry, wrapped in bandages and casts, leaning weakly against a doorway on the upper level. "Harry, what?" Hermione asked. "I asked him to pretend to hex me," Harry said. "We found out that Malfoy had concocted a nutty plan to rig the Quidditch match and make Firebolt look bad, and he thought for some reason that Milo would hex me to protect the reputation of the Broomstick Company. I can't imagine why. So I asked Milo to pretend to go along with it and faked the whole thing. Malfoy thought his plan had worked, and his team pretended to lose control of their brooms. It was all faked. Milo never really hexed me." McGonagall, Ron, and Hermione stared at him, shock evident on their faces. McGonagall's mouth moved a few times as if she were about to speak, but couldn't quite find the right words. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stared at her in hopeful silence. Eventually she rallied somewhat. "Of all the... Not even Fred and George would have..." "Okay, maybe Fred and George, but how did you discover this alleged plan?" "Oh," said Ron, "that was me. He just bragged to me about it, right to my face, just before the match. Can't imagine why." "He told you?" McGonagall said. "But why? I spoke to Milo earlier. He came up with some preposterous tale about Professor Snape and Polyjuice. Why didn't he just tell me the truth?" Because he's only 11 and was scared?" Hermione suggested hopefully. McGonagall sighed. "Well, I'll have to owl the ministry immediately and tell them to cancel the hearing. Of all the crackpot schemes, this one has to take the cake." "So," Hermione said, hope rising on her face like the sun. "So he's cleared? He won't be expelled?" "No," McGonagall said, "but this was, nonetheless, an underhanded move unworthy of our house. And Mr. Potter, I thought better of you. 20 points from Gryffindor from you and Milo each, and detention every Saturday for the rest of November. And December, at least. And you two," McGonagall turned to Ron and Hermione, "were you involved in this as well?" "No, not involved in any way whatsoever, ma'am," Ron said smoothly, his years of living in the same house as the twins paying off. "Us?" Involved? Nope, Hermione said nervously. McGonagall eyed them suspiciously, but instead of giving them detention, just turned and walked up the stairs to her office, muttering to herself about needing a fire whiskey. There were a few blessed seconds of relief for the three Fens as they savored their triumph. It was interrupted, however, by a fell shriek that could have raised the dead. In a manner of speaking, it did. The ghost of nearly headless Nick, hovering nearby, was so startled that he nearly lost his head. "What are you doing out of bed, young man?" came the terrible voice of the wrathful Madame Pomfrey. Harry turned around in terror, while Hermione and Ron simply fled. When word got around that Milo's surprise attack on the boy who lived was not, and as had been generally believed, treachery most foul, but rather a component in a gambit to sabotage the Slytherin Quidditch team and guarantee a Gryffindor win, there was much shuffling of feet and making of sheepish glances in the Gryffindor common room. "So really, when it comes down to it, we're sorry, mate," said an NPC, Seamus Finnegan, not that Milo knew or particularly cared. "Why the sudden reversal of opinion?" Milo asked. "Well, you see, Hermione came into the common room about an hour ago," said Fred. "And she stood up on the table, right in the center of the room," continued George. "It was horrible," said another NPC, Dean Thomas, "like a banshee of wrath. And she started speaking, and the walls shook. Only see, nobody saw her cast Sonoa, so it was all her. And she calmly told us about judging people before fully understanding the situation. Oh yeah, definitely calm. Level-headed she was. The windows shattered of their own accord. And if she asks, we didn't even hint otherwise. And thus we were enlightened into the errors of our ways," finished George. "Frankly, I'm surprised you didn't hear it, mate," said Dean. Milo noticed that they were calling him mate a lot. "Hermione must have put some kind of charm to keep teachers in the halls from storming in to see what all the screaming was about," Milo shrugged. "She's careful like that." In truth, he'd heard every word, but he wanted to hear them explain it anyways. It was more fun that way. "I thought you were innocent the whole time," said Hannah. "Isn't this the boys' dorm?" asked Dean. Hannah colored slightly. "So," Seamus said, somewhat nervously, "want to come down and have some butterbeer? There's not much left, but it's really good. How Fred and George get this stuff, I'll never know." "And we'll never tell," Fred winked. "Yeah," said Milo, "I think I'd like that." The whole room gave a collective sigh of relief. "So," he said on the way down to the common room, "what's your excuse going to be next week?" "Sorry, mate?" asked George. "For a party. It seems like a weekly tradition around here." "It isn't," said Fred slowly. "But it should be," said George, whose forehead wrinkled in a thought for a moment. "We'll think of something," he said. "Trust us." "And drink this," Fred said, pushing a heavy tankard of butterbeer into Milo's hands. Milo sipped it cautiously and suddenly grinned. The stuff wasn't ale, the preferred method of hydration for adventurers everywhere, but it was pretty fantastic. And before you cry, "But he's only 11, he's far too young for ale," you should be advised that there are, in fact, no rules for intoxication from alcohol anywhere to be found in the D&D handbook. It can therefore be concluded via strict interpretation of the rules of the Holy Rules as written that one can drink gallons of tequila like water. "Shouldn't we have waited for Harry to get out of the hospital?" Milo asked suddenly. "That's what we thought," said Fred. "Maybe. But he gave us the permission to celebrate without him in future events such as this, so long as we save him some of the provender, some of the joy. Speaking of which, hands off the last of the every-flavored beans, you greedy git," George said, glaring at Ron. The Quidditch victory party concluded a little after midnight, when a sleepy McGonagall made them all go to bed. Despite Fred and George's promise, the next few weeks were surprisingly uneventful. Not that that prevented them from finding excuses for celebration, as their Happy November the 22nd day festivities attested to. Milo's time was taken up by almost constant detentions, both from McGonagall and Snape now, and lessons with McGonagall, but he found enough time to research benign transportation, disguise self, nerve skitter, and resist energy. If Snape had any reaction to his latest plot to expel Milo, it went unnoticed among his usual horribleness. Quirrell started a unit on vampires, which sent Hermione into a panic because it wasn't on the original reading list. It was on a cold December afternoon when Milo returned to the common room to find a small crowd gathered around the bulletin board. "What's going on?" Milo asked. "It's Quirrell," said Lee. Fear gripped Milo's heart. Had Snape finally gotten the better of the enigmatic defense professor? "What happened to him?" "Nothing," said Lee. "Only he's starting a dueling club." The bulletin had a large parchment poster pinned to it, reading Sunday Dueling Club sign up on it, with a number of lines for people to write their names in. The lines were already all taken, and several people had scrawled their name haphazardly in the margins. Milo grinned. Sundays were his remaining free day, so there was nothing to stop him from attending Quirrell's club and stomping some of the local wizards for fun and XP. What were they going to do? Shoot sparks at him? The poster said the club meetings would start after the holiday break. "Hey, Ron," Milo said, picking up his party member out of the crowd. "What's a holiday break?" "You don't even know what a holiday break is?" Ron said, flabbergasted. "Everyone!" Hermione coughed pointedly. "Here would like nothing more than to illuminate you on this subject," Ron finished smoothly. "Everyone gets to go home for Christmas," Hermione explained. "Do we have to?" Milo and Harry said simultaneously. "Jinx," muttered Harry. "What? Where?" Milo asked, looking around warily. "Never mind," said Harry. "It's a Muggle thing." "No," Hermione said. "You can stay for the holidays, but almost nobody does." "Cool," said Milo. "Also, what's Christmas?" Milo asked. Hermione, who had the bad timing to be drinking from a glass of water right then, snorted at the drink from her nose. "What's Christmas?" she asked. "Everyone knows. Ahem. It's a holiday that happens once a year on December 25th, where people give each other presents." "Do I need a costume again?" "No, costumes on Christmas are strictly optional." "Will there be trolls?" "No, there's just Father Christmas and his elves," Hermione said, regretting it instantly. "Elves again, eh?" Milo asked, rubbing his hands together. "Harry put them on the list. These elves have come up enough now that I'm sure they must be relevant to something. What sort of elf are they, these ones that work for this Father Christmas?" "Christmas elves?" Hermione said in a quiet voice. "Must be an obscure, non-core subrace. I'll keep an eye out for them. What's Father Christmas?" Children believe he travels to everyone's house at night on a flying sleigh and delivers presents on Christmas," Hermione explained. "But nobody really thinks he's real. People also call him Santa Claus." "Santa Claus? This just keeps getting worse and worse," Milo said. "He must be an exceptionally powerful caster to be able to cast enough time stops to get all the way around the world in a single night. Unless he has a use-activated magic item. Wow, that would be worth a fortune." "But he's not really real," Hermione insisted. "I can't tell you how many times I've heard that before," Milo snorted. "There are tales, unfounded of course, of a fell monster in the woods, or they speak in whispered voices of a wolf that walks among men. I'm sure it's just a rumor, though." "Hermione," Milo said, in a tone of someone talking to a small, ignorant child, "if there's one thing I'm surprised you haven't learned by now, it's that all rumors are true." "But Father Christmas isn't real," she insisted. "Oh, really?" Milo asked. "Harry once told me that Muggles don't believe in dragons, magic, elves, or goblins," Milo scoffed. "And all of those things are real." "That's no reason to think." "Hermione, how many of the things you believed as a small child, only to find out as a medium child were make-believe, turned out to be real when, as a large child, you discovered you were a witch?" There was a brief silence as Hermione did some mental arithmetic. "Most of them," Hermione admitted with a frown. "But come on, Father Christmas? Not even wizards believe in him, right, Ron?" Ron didn't respond. Ron? Father Christmas isn't real? He asked, stunned. Fred and George said they saw him once. Oh, he's real all right, Milo said grimly. And worse, he's in league with the elves. With that, Milo strode off to his favorite armchair, one in the corner, which presented him with a clear view of the room, while also being close enough to the window that he could dive out and feather fall in case of an emergency, pulling materials out of his belt of hidden pouches. What are you doing? Where are you going? Harry asked. I have to put the finishing touches on my robe of arcane might, Milo said. I might be needing it soon. He had to find a way to get out of his detentions. They were cutting into his crafting time. Maybe if he could slay Slanticlaws and take this magic item of time stop. Milo wasn't exactly sure what this Father Christmas's connection was to the drow in the kitchen that had tried to poison him, but one thing was for sure. If Santa, or any of his little elves, tried anything on or about Christmas, they weren't just going to walk away from it. We're on to Chapter 17, White Christmas. Hey, Harry, said Milo excitedly, running up to his party member in their dorm room. It was the day before the holiday, and everyone was eagerly awaiting 2 weeks at home. Everyone, that is, except Harry and Milo, who were staying. What's up? Harry asked. Check this out, he said, holding up an ordinary-looking Hogwarts school uniform. You're finally done tinkering with that thing? Harry asked. You said it would be done weeks ago. Yeah, well, Milo said. Feature creep, you know. And then there's all the detentions. Anyway, take this, Milo said, passing Harry the cold iron dagger that he kept in his magic belt. Why do you have a knife? Okay, Milo said, practically bursting with excitement. Now, stab it. This is a pretty serious-looking knife. Never mind that! Stabbity stab! You carry this around all the time? I think that's against school rules. Oh, come on! Those wands are lethal weapons and they give them to 11-year-olds. What's a masterwork shiv here and there? Now stab! Milo was bouncing on his heels. Is this like the time you threw a mug at me? Exactly like that. This robe is practically made of mage armor. Really? Harry asked skeptically. No, not really. That's not how it works. But it's a simple enough lie that your unenlightened brain can handle it. Now stab the robes. Fine. Harry stabbed them. Much to his surprise, the knife simply glanced off the garment as if it were made from hardened steel. Harry frowned and stared at the knife. Milo said. What do you think? Cool, huh? Totally ordinary Hogwarts uniform until blam, I get attacked. And then guess what? I'm God's damn invincible. This must not be a very good knife, Harry said, ignoring Milo completely and staring at the dagger in his hand. And that's not all, Milo said. It gives me a +1 caster level to conjuration spells. I mean, it can't even cut through an ordinary school uniform. That means a whole 6 more seconds of Hippogriff. I mean, it looks sharp. I wonder if it's some sort of trick dagger? Or 10 feet more to range of glitter dust. Or maybe you had a metal plate hidden inside the robe? That's like a whole 20% more caster levels. No, then it'd still have cut the robe. It must be the knife. Or 60% more with the Arcanist gloves. Maybe I should try and cut something else with it. That would tell me for sure if it was the knife or the robe. And that's not all! I added in Fire Resistance 5 as a custom bonus feature. I'll go test it on the curtain of my bed, maybe. So now it, and by extension, I am fireproof! Well, it works on the bed, that's for sure. Well, maybe not fireproof, more like fire resistant. Maybe I should test it on Ron's bed, too, just to be sure. But it's more than enough to make me very nearly safe against conventional fire. With this, I can walk into a burning building for up to, on average, 6 minutes. Or if the dice are against me, only 22 seconds before burning to death. But that's still pretty good. Huh, it works on Ron's bed as well as mine. Maybe the knife is exceptionally good at cutting curtains, but suboptimally on cutting robes. There's only one way to be sure. You know, I think, somehow, that I'm not getting through to you here. You think? Well, it certainly seems capable of cutting Ron's spare robes. I'll go show Hermione, Milo said dejectedly. She knows how to appreciate proper magic when she sees it. Fine, fine, Harry said distractedly. I'll go visit Hagrid. Harry said finally. He's been a bit down ever since Quirrell killed his dog. To say that Hagrid was a bit down was rather like saying the elemental plane of water was a bit damp. He had been aimlessly wandering the halls in tears since Halloween, bemoaning the loss of his beloved monstrosity. Milo shrugged and walked down the stairs into the common room. True to form, Hermione was curled up on an armchair reading a thick, dusty old tome. Hey, said Milo, can I see that? Hermione asked absently, not looking up. Scholar's touch, Milo muttered, tapping the book quickly. Hey, Hermione said, pulling it away from him. Interesting, Milo said. But no matter how knowledgeable she is on the history of goblin uprisings in Central Europe, she uses the word irregardless 24 times. Just toss it in the fire like the kindling it is, would you? Did you just come in here to show off, or was there something else? Hermione snapped. Actually, there was something. I need you to... Hang on, Milo said, pulling on his robes. Okay, I need you to light me on fire. See, my robes are... Incendio, Hermione said, waving her wand in a complicated little pattern. A bright little jet of fire shot out of the tip of Hermione's wand, but dissipated as soon as it touched Milo's robes. I'm going to pretend that you waited for me to say my robes make me fire-resistant before you tried to immolate me, Milo said. I figured it was something like that, Hermione said absently, although I had hoped otherwise. Don't touch my books. I'll try to keep that in mind. Milo saw Hannah sitting in the corner, looking at him for some reason. As soon as he noticed her, she abruptly looked away. Well, there's weirdos all over. Hey, Milo said, walking over to her. What you up to? Oh, just reading the Tales of Beetle the Bard, she said. It's upside down, Milo said. What? Really? Hannah asked in alarm, glancing down at it. No, it's not. Nah, but you checked. Anyway, look, there was something I'd been meaning to ask you for a while now, Milo said. He wasn't quite sure how to say this. Yes? Hannah asked, her heart beating rapidly. Well, it's about something I've sort of been wondering about with regards to you, he said. Something I just can't figure out. Hannah said, not trusting herself to speak. I was wondering, you remember that day in September, the first time we all had detention with Snape? We were cleaning statues watched by the Baron. Hannah nodded quickly. Well, then you vanished, and I led the search to find you. Hannah felt like she was about to burst, and eventually had to enlist the aid of the defense professor in most of Hogwarts' portraits, Milo continued. But eventually we found you. Hannah just nodded again. You were in the lake. What? Hannah asked. The lake. We found you in the Hogwarts lake. What on earth were you doing there? You came up to ask me about the lake, Hannah said flatly. Yep, Milo said cheerfully. Oh, look at the time. I really must be going now. Things to do, people to see, lakes to fall into. Gotta run. Cheerio. Bye. Hannah gathered up her stuff and strode out of the common room like a woman with a purpose. She went down one of Hogwarts' trick corridors, Hermione said idly, not looking up from her book. It turned into a slide and she came out right into the lake. If not for the giant squid, I think we'd all be doing it on hot days. And that was a mean thing you just did. What? Asking her how she got laked? I can't figure out how you would put any malicious intent into that. Until you did it right in front of me, neither could I, Hermione said, turning a page. Should I go find her and apologize? No, absolutely not. Believe me, in this case, it's better to feign ignorance. People are weird, Milo said under his breath, staring out the window. Being in the middle of winter in northern Scotland, what he saw was mostly white. He could only see a few yards because snowstorms give a -1 to spot every 2.5 feet. Milo resisted, barely the urge to say, I'm sure everything's all white. You know, Milo said idly, If I could take the covers off all the books in the library and stitch them together. Hermione looked up at him in horror. Then I could read the whole lot with a single scholar's touch. I think Madame Pince would have the books rebound with your skin as a warning to the rest of us, Hermione said, and I'd be right there, holding you down while she did it. Don't. Touch your books. Yeah, I remember. Why don't you go make some more magic doodads or something? Hermione asked testily. Can't, Milo said. You can only work on a magic item up to 8 hours a day. Where on earth did you find 8 hours already today? We only got out of class an hour ago. Well, what do you do in history of magic? I take notes, of course. Well, that's what Mordecai's for, Milo grinned. You trust your rat, Hermione said aghast, to listen in class for you. Of course, he wasn't doing anything else at the time. How can your rat write? Easily. He can speak to me in a sort of unique little language. The rules clearly state that a literate character, anyone but a barbarian who has not spent a skill point to become literate, can read and write any language that they speak. Each language has an alphabet, though sometimes several spoken languages share a single alphabet. Mordecai is, obviously, not a barbarian. He can therefore write in an undecipherable code that only I can read, which, incidentally, looks a lot like Elvish. Hermione frowned. That's a pretty shaky read of the rules, and... Wait, what rules? Milo snorted. When you people are taught to count, Milo said, we're taught to abuse poorly thought out rules. You were in lessons as a child to abuse rules. Hermione was horrified. Nah, I skipped them all to go fight kobolds in the sewers. Myra, City of Light, City of Magic, city law states that children under the age of 12 must attend school, but it never said they had to attend school more than once. Hermione's mouth moved, but no words came out. It's funny, I got an A in my Munchkin course without ever showing up past the first lesson. All the students that showed up failed. Out, Hermione said, throwing a cushion at him. Just let me read in peace. She reached for another cushion. Milo, despite having faced down an acromantula, a troll, dozens of skeletons and kobolds, and goblins beyond measure, was disinclined to face a wrathful Hermione, and promptly utilized a strategic maneuver to leave the common room. I'm bored, Milo declared proudly as he exited the portal. That's nice, said the fat lady. You should try hanging on a wall for several hundred years. Boredom was a state so rare for an adventurer that he decided to savor it for as long as he could. Being boredom, of course, this only lasted for about a microsecond before he was dying for something to do. Hey, Milo said suddenly, you know about this world's quaint little culture, right? I know anything and everything that it can be observed by hanging on a wall, watching students walk past, and pretending not to hide a secret passageway. So yes. This Christmas thing, Milo said, I'm led to understand that people give each other presents. Correct, said the fat lady. Now, when they say people, that includes you, yes. Crap. Indeed. And if, say, someone were to hypothetically upset a friend of theirs in the days leading up to this gift-giving holiday, and were for some reason recommended against direct apology, is this friend female? Yes. Then the gift had better be damn special. Crap. Indeed. I have, 8 days? 7. I'd best get started then. Correct. The vast majority of Hogwarts students went home over the holidays, and for those who remained, the 2-week break was a time to lie around in their respective common rooms, play Exploding Snap, and, for the less danger-inclined, wizarding chess. Not so for Milo, who spent day and night working on Christmas presents, researching spells, and resting, really planning and setting traps for the arrival of the dreaded Santa Claus, each in exactly 8-hour increments per day. When Christmas Eve rolled around, Ron and Harry were surprised to see Milo, weary and exhausted, trudge zombie-like into their dormitory. Blimey, said Ron, who was staying at the castle because his parents went to visit his brother Charlie in Romania. We thought you'd gone home for the holidays. Where have you been? Harry asked. Nobody's seen you at meal times, in the common room, or even in bed. Christmas, Milo slurred. When was the last time you slept? Harry asked, looking equal parts concerned and amused. Over 100,800 rounds ago, Milo said. People from where he was from were very good at telling time, but only in rounds, which was a unit of 6 seconds. What are you carrying there? Ron asked, pointing at a heavy bag Milo had slung over his shoulder. Christmas, Milo repeated, and slipped into unconsciousness in his 4-poster bed. Nutter, Ron said, but at least he's on our side. The residents of Gryffindor Tower awoke to an unpleasant surprise on Christmas morning. Glitter dust! Obscuring mist! Summon 1d4 plus 1 celestial giant fire beetles! Ah! Giraffe! I've gone blind! He was here! Father Christmas was here! While I slept! Oh, why did I sleep? Who let me sleep? Why didn't we post any sentries? Grease! Milo was standing in the middle of the dorm, casting offensive spells at random. The room was full of dense fog, concealing everything except for blindingly bright, sparkling gold particles of magic and the red, glowing eyes of 4 giant beetles that were skittering about, clicking loudly. We'll all be killed! Fortunately, Milo ran out of spells in about a minute, and the protesting struggles of Ron and Harry managed to convince him that Santa Claus wasn't about to jump out from under a bed and kill him. And that, said Ron, is why you need to sleep more than once every 8 nights. Happy Christmas, by the way. I've got some presents, Harry said in surprise, the small pile of wrapped gifts visible now that the dust had cleared and the noise had stopped. What were you expect? Ron began, but Milo cut him off. You don't normally get presents? Milo asked. Nah, said Harry. This is the first time. So they're not mandatory? I didn't have to get you anything? Blimey, said Ron. I don't think you've quite grasped the meaning of Christmas. Harry groaned. If anyone suggests we go on an adventure to discover the true meaning of Christmas, he said, I am going to have to put my foot down. An adventure, eh? Milo asked, his eyes alight. No adventures, insisted Ron firmly. We open presents, we have Christmas dinner, we play games, we have fun with friends and family. That's it. Oh, Milo said, looking downcast. The first package opened was by Harry from his aunt and uncle. It contained something Milo had never seen before. Something unnatural. What is it? Milo asked, looking fascinated. I don't know, said Ron. Look at the shape. It's a 50-pence piece, Harry said, biting down laughter. Where's the rest of it? Milo asked. That's all they sent. So if this is a piece of the 50 pence, Milo said thoughtfully, what happens when we combine all 7 shards? There are 7, right? It's usually either 7 or 3. Do we become masters of the 50 pence? Harry doubled over with laughter. No, mate. I heard my dad talking about this once, Ron said in hushed tones. It's what muggles use for money. What, this? Milo asked. It's not made of gold or platinum, silver, or even copper. How do they know how much it's worth? My dad couldn't figure it out either, Ron said. He theorizes that muggles have a sense that wizards lack that tell them how much their money is worth, and my dad's a professional. I guess they just have to have something to balance out their lack of magic, Milo mused. Harry was in real danger of dying due to lack of air. He was laughing so hard. I don't trust it, Ron said. If it's not made of precious metals, what's to stop people from just transfiguring more of it? Milo gasped. They don't have any magic at all. They can't just transmute or transfigure money. Milo was amazed. Whoa, said Ron. That's mind-blowing. They can use anything as money then. I should write my dad about this. In the end, Harry let Ron keep the coin to show him Mr. Weasley and turned to his other presents. You got me new spectacles, Milo? Harry asked when he opened Milo's gift. They look exactly like my current ones. So nobody will know the difference, Milo said, tapping the side of his nose. I'm not going to do that in a conspiratorial way. Thank you? I suppose a spare will come in handy, Harry said dubiously. Put them on, Milo insisted. Harry, obligingly, slipped off his current pair and put on Milo's new ones. Blimey, Harry gasped. They look like ordinary specs, Milo said, but really they're eyes of the eagle. They give +5 to spot. That means that you can see things 50 feet away with the same level of detail as you could see something right in front of your nose without them, and because they're enchanted using my form of magic, none of your wizards can tell that they're anything out of the ordinary. Harry stared at Milo for a moment, then his face broke into a wide grin. So I can wear them during Quidditch without breaking any rules, he said, or at least without getting caught. Thanks, Milo. These are awesome. You'll have to get a proper eye doctor to have the lenses done in your prescription, though, said Milo, who had asked Hermione earlier about how glasses worked. Until then, the -2 penalty you incur will counter out some of the bonus. Shouldn't be too much of a problem, Harry said. Hope you like them, Milo said. You did pay for them, after all. Ron, who was staring at Harry's gift enviously, sifted through his, rather large, he has a big family, pile of presents to find Milo's. Unwrapping it, he revealed an ordinary-looking quill. What's it do? Ron asked eagerly. It writes words, Milo said. That's all? Ron asked, sounding disappointed. Yeah, but it does it all by itself. I made this one custom. It's my own invention. See, what you do is, you just tap it to the piece of paper or parchment or whatever to activate. It'll immediately start copying whatever you were looking at when it started, and it won't stop until it's done, or after 2,500 words, whichever comes first. I figure it'll come in handy when you're copying Hermione's notes, Milo explained. It'll even turn the page and keep going on to the next one when necessary. Blimey, Ron gasped, holding the quill like it was a long-lost family member. That's bloody brilliant. It only works once a day, though, so keep it away from parchment don't trigger it, and don't trigger by accident. I call it the pen of plagiarism, +5. +5 what? Ron asked. Nothing, Milo said unabashedly. But from where I come from, you can charge exponentially more for stuff that's plus something. Milo turned to his presents, which, as it turned out, were, as far as he was concerned, even better than minor magic items. Each of Neville, Harry, Ron, and Hermione had decided independently to get him a huge package of every flavored beans. I think, Milo said around a huge mouthful of the bizarre sweets, that I like this Christmas thing. A lot of work, though. Harry, wearing an emerald sweater knitted by Miss Weasley, opened his last package. A silvery gray gossamer cloth floated out and fell to the floor. Ron gasped. Huh, Harry said. It looks like a cloak. Put it on, Ron urged. If it's what I think it is, well, there's only one way to find out. You, Harry said pointedly, have been spending too much time with Hermione. Nevertheless, did, and promptly vanished. Milo and Ron both gasped. It's an invisibility cloak, Ron said, while Milo said, It's a cloak of invisibility. Harry pulled it off. Why do they call it that? He asked. 'Cause it makes you invisible, said Ron. Duh, added Milo. I didn't feel invisible, Harry said skeptically. Here, you put it on. He passed it to Ron, who held it reverently. True to form, Ron vanished as soon as he put it on. Huh, said Harry. You don't see that every day. I do, actually, Milo pointed out. He usually prepared invisibility once a day. Oh, I've been meaning to test something, actually. Harry, put it on again. When Harry complied, Milo cast See Invisibility. Harry appeared in front of him as a translucent shape. Excellent, Milo said. Score 1 for my magic, for once. Must be because of the vague wording of See Invisibility, Milo thought. It just says reveals any objects or creatures that are invisible, not creatures that are infected by invisibility. Did it come with a card? Ron asked curiously. Those things are really expensive. I wonder who would spend that much on you. Harry rooted around in the ground for a moment, then produced a small note with a handwritten message. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It's time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you." "That," said Milo, "is singularly unhelpful. Put it on the list." Harry was looking at the note strangely. "What's the matter?" Ron asked. "Nothing," Harry said. Milo shrugged and began preparing spells for the day. Fortunately, his episode in the morning had come from yesterday's spells. Harry and Ron settled down to play a game of Exploding Snap. "Hey," Milo said suddenly, having finished renewing his allotment of spells. "Anyone know if Hannah's staying for the holidays?" Said Ron. "Yeah, I think I saw her at dinner the other day with Lavender Brown." "Cool. Bye," Milo said, leaving the dorm abruptly. On his way out, he passed Fred and George, wearing matching Weasley jumpers. "And then we'll say we know we're called Fred and George," Fred was saying in a low voice. "Oh, hey, Milo," George said as Milo passed. "Hey," Milo said, barely giving them a glance. "Wait," he said and turned. "Have either of you seen Hannah Abbott around?" "Yeah," said Fred. "Last I saw, she was heading out of the common room." "Oh," George added. "She was wearing a coat and a scarf, so she was probably going outside." "What, in that?" Milo asked, gesturing at the window. The snow was really picking up. "Didn't you try and stop her?" "Yeah, but she ignored us. Don't worry, I'm sure she'll be all white." Milo groaned, and not just because of the terrible pun. He was going to have to find her and deliver her mandatory apology present. Milo hustled out of the common room and down the stairs to the great hall, pulling on parts of his cold weather outfit from his belt of hidden pouches as he went. On the way, he decided that his next project would be to make his uniform shift weave as well, which allowed it to transform into other outfits instantly. Milo opened the massive great hall doors to find snow piled up to his head. "I am not walking in that," Milo said. "Fly," he cast, and suddenly felt himself become weightless. "Locate object, Hannah's robes," he cast, and felt a light tug to his right. Milo effortlessly floated up off the ground and through the heavy snow. Shouldn't she have left tracks? Milo wondered, looking around. Of course, it was possible that the snow had filled them in already, but really, with snow that deep, she'd have to dig a tunnel to get around. Something felt very wrong about this whole situation. The wind was picking up, and the cold began to bite effortlessly through Milo's robes. Milo decided an Endure Elements enchantment was in order as well. You'd have to be suicidal to willingly venture out here, Milo thought. And she went alone? Highly suspect. As Milo flew, skimming a few feet above the ground, he felt his locate object spell abruptly end. Okay, Milo thought, his teeth chattering. Either she entered an area warded against divination, she's surrounded by lead, someone dispelled my magic, or she's out of range. Let's assume the first one is out, because there isn't much interaction between my magic and the local strain. It's possible their wards against detection would work, but improbable. My spell can't have been dispelled because I'd have noticed it when I made an opposed caster level check, unless the local equivalent doesn't allow to check. Milo groaned. He had no idea what happened. Only one thing for it. Circle Dance, cast Milo quietly, swapping out Summon Monster 3. Circle Dance is an obscure spell that locates the direction from you to a creature, much like Locate Object or Locate Creature, except that it had no range limit. However, it takes a minute to cast, burns a 3rd level spell slot, and only has an instantaneous effect. If the target moves, you won't have any idea. On the plus side, it gives a vague impression of the target's physical and emotional condition. Milo spun in a circle with his eyes closed until he finished casting the spell, which left him feeling a little dizzy. He opened his eyes, pointing in the direction she was in, and knowing she was unharmed and emotionally perfectly content, which was concerning, but not the most concerning thing. Milo groaned. He was looking directly at the Forbidden Forest. Really, he wondered, why did I ever think this little trip wouldn't end up with me in mortal danger? With a sigh and a longing glance at the comfortable Gryffindor Tower, now only a speck of light in the whiteout, Milo sped off towards the forest. Milo had just gotten past the edge of the forest when Fly ran out of duration, and he fell heavily in the snow. Should have known, he said, his teeth chattering, that if foul weather is mentioned, I'd soon be slogging in it. The castle is making me complacent. With difficulty, Milo cast another locate object on Hannah's clothing, swapping out the previously prepared invisibility. To his surprise, she was somewhere behind him. At the start of combat, all characters involved have to make an initiative roll, with a bonus based off of their dexterity and a few other things. This determines the order in which combatants act. People who rolled higher on initiative due to luck or by virtue of possessing quick reflexes act before those who rolled lower. This makes Nerve Skitter, a first-level spell which grants a +5 to initiative rolls, an extremely unusual spell, as it must be cast while you are rolling initiative, or in other words, after a character is aware that there is trouble, but before his muscles have had time to respond to his commands. For someone such as you or I, this is patently impossible. A wizard, however, is somehow capable of both speaking the verbal components and waving his hands about in a complicated gesture to cast the spell before he is physically capable of doing either. Nerve Skitter, Milo cast, speaking every syllable simultaneously and in harmony, in blatant violations of the laws of common sense. He was surrounded by a brief blue glow and rolled to the side just as a glowing red bolt of magic flew past the space he had previously occupied. The bolt hit a tree, pieces of bark flying away from the contact point. Mirror Image, he cast, and a pair of illusionary Milo duplicates appeared next to him. The real Milo lay flat in the snow, minimizing his visibility. Another red bolt of light hit one solidly in the torso, causing the image to fall to the ground, motionless. Milo quickly ran through his options. He had no idea what the location or identity of his attacker was, which precluded the use of grease, glitter dust, or in fact any offensive spell. Summon Hippogriff, Milo cast. Hippogriffs could track by scent, so didn't strictly require vision. Milo grinned, happy that he had learned Summon Monster 3 after his battle with the troll. The proud horse-eagle hybrid thing appeared in front of Milo with a shriek and ran forwards. It got about 10 feet before Milo saw a green flash, and the summoned monster keeled over, dead. Holy crap, Milo thought. They're using the killing curse. And Milo was running low on spells. Okay, he thought in a panic. Okay, it's not so bad. They clearly can't see you either, right? Or you'd be dead already. A few more curses flew over Milo's head and hit some evergreen trees, which promptly turned brown and withered, dropping needles. And they can cast more than one per round, or there's 3 of them gaining up on me. A desperate plan came to Milo's mind. None of his prepared spells would help him, as far as he could tell, so he had to use something he could cast without prior preparation, a divination. Most casters believe divination to be a soft school, but Milo knew better. Divinations could kill. True Strike, he cast, granting his next attack a +20 to hit, which would be enough to hit an unusually petite fly at a distance from about here to Jupiter. More curses flew over his head. Guided Shot, he cast, which allowed his next attack to ignore cover and concealment. Neither of these would help him target a grease or glitter dust, or even a fireball, if he knew how to cast it, as those were all area attacks. They would only help him with a direct attack, the kind which required accuracy, also known as the type of spell that Milo avoided like the plague. So instead of casting a spell at all, he drew his, so far never used, cold iron dagger and threw it in a completely random direction. Milo's plan was then to cast Locate Object on the dagger, which did a paltry 1d4 to -1 damage, practically non-lethal against the targets Milo was used to, which would let him identify the location of his foe so he could follow up with an arcane barrage. It was only after the dagger left his fingers and he had confirmed a critical hit for double damage that he realized his mistake. The dagger, guided by Milo's magic, had flown in exactly the same direction as his previous cast of Locate Object, which was still active, told him Hannah was standing. Milo heard a sickening thud, and the curses abruptly stopped flying. Alrighty there, ladies and gentlemen. That was chapter 17. Interestingly titled White Christmas. It's truly going to be a white or red Christmas for poor Hannah. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. If you have not followed me, please do follow. We also are finally an affiliate here, so, hang out. You can get those chats and emojis, and you can hang out with us without commercials, which is awfully nice. If you would like to help support the channel, because we have to do things like buy equipment on a somewhat regular basis, unfortunately, you can join us either through our Patreon, or you can purchase us a jittery beverage at Coffee. Both of those links are in our About page here on Twitch. And if you are behind in the chapters that we've been reading, the fanfic is online, and the link for that is in the chat. I can post that again here, in theory. There we go. They are also on our YouTube channel if you would like to check them out there. We will be posting some other content there as well, but currently it is mainly the stuff coming from Twitch. Thank you all so much, and have a good rest of your night. Bye.